I mean, what do I think about it? It's sad, of course. I mean, that's probably a hack, right? You hack the system. Yeah.
And software patent, I mean, you can in some way understand. I mean, if you try to defend also patents, there is a good purpose behind them, I think, especially if you look at the medical sector. And if someone comes up with a great virus or cure for something, and they spent billions of dollars developing it, if anyone could just copy that, no one could really do the research to properly develop a proper cure for some disease. So in that case, I think it's very valid that you have to do it. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's about the investment that you put into something, right? You invest as a company into an invention or into a product or a use case or whatever, and a solution. And you want to use it as an asset for the companies. You don't want that anybody can just take it and copy-paste it.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's more than an asset, I would say. It's actually the only way to survive as a company, because otherwise people could copy it.
Yeah.
And that's sell it for a margin of the cost, because they don't have the research costs behind it that the original company did. So I think in that case, it's clear that patent is vital to be able to have the type of research that we want to have in companies as well, the type of industrial research. But then when it comes to more software patents and patents on algorithms or on math, then there is more of a gray zone.
Exactly. And it's not black and white. It's also how you deal with a patent, or what your approach is to protect it, or to sue other companies, I guess.
But without going into detail, could you just tell us a little bit about the journey, the story, how it came, how you came into that, how you realized you wanted to go, and, a little bit about the process.
Yeah. So I was working, or I am working with a client, and we have developed a method and approach, a technical solution to save electricity cost for an industrial factory. And we have realized nobody else has done it before. There's also no academic research describing the solution. So we want to protect this idea, to just be sure that nobody else can block us from doing it by filing a patent, essentially. So yeah, that was the idea. We have essentially, the process is you write down the idea in simple words. In our case, we had help from a patent lawyer that helped us to formulate claims. So essentially, it's rephrasing what your idea in legal speak. It sounds kind of way more complicated than you think it is, and I guess it has to be like that because it's read by lawyers.
I remember also some of my previous experience with that, and we actually had some awesome patent engineers, and they just had an interview with me, and I tried to describe it from a technical point of view, what the system did. And then they wrote up this kind of patent application, 30, 40 pages or something. Mm-hmm. I couldn't even understand what they wrote. Yeah. The title didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand the content. They had beautiful schematics and diagrams of stuff, and I was, what is this? But it was, of course, related to it. It's just that they were very skilled in how to generalize the idea to something that potentially can be patented in some way. But it I don't know. I have mixed feelings. I'm a bit subjective in this area. But if we say it like this, what do you think in general? Why would a company like the one you are working with now, what's the value for that company to pursue patents?
Well, I guess the risk is always that somebody else patents the same solution and sues you for doing it.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's like a game, who comes first and who protects the claims.
So it may not be that you go after other in an offensive way. It's just the way to be defensive, and so that you will not get sued for doing what you already invented.
Yeah, that's one purpose, right?
But also, I guess, I think you mentioned before, it can be seen as an asset for the company itself to say that, for investors and other people, this is actually something we have a patent for, and that increases the value in the company in some way, right?
Yeah. I mean, you spend money on doing this as well, right? We're working on this solution, so it makes sense to also claim that it's our solution. in the end.
But I mean, like defensive is one step, but I really like that understanding that how do we translate knowledge work into assets of the company? I mean, like even the hardcore challenge of getting knowledge work as part of the balance sheet, so to speak. And then patents is actually a viable path. You can, with a patent, you can then show and you can start putting value around that.
Yeah.
I think that's quite...
It is. On the other hand, open source might also be a strategy, right? I mean, there are also companies building a lot of software and spending a lot of time and money into building software that they then open source and anybody can use it. But there's also a value to that because you can get help back from the community.
But that's a really interesting discussion. Okay, when you contrast and when you put the patent path versus the open source path, and what's the pros and cons, and even can you do both? Or is it fundamentally different philosophical ideas? So one company will always go for patents and another company will always go for open source. That's a very, what's your thoughts around? Because you open up, if you elaborate yourself. That's a good one.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends also on the environment you're operating in, right? If you are working in an industry where all your competitors claim everything and try to sue everybody else, it's probably a hard move to open source what you're doing and put it out there, I guess.
But this is fun. Let me just give the listeners a sneak peek on some of the fun discussions we had in the after work. So we had fun with our guests, used for pure fun, to rate, which one of our top the tech giants of the world are our top 5. Which one do we think is nicest, and which one do we think is, most evil? Most evil, all for fun. And it's actually a really interesting conversation because someone highlights, I don't like this company because they use personal information as the core value, asset. So they are last. And then Anders, you're always right. No, I was not going to say that. But you always build up the ladder as a researcher, I think, and as at heart, truly at heart, as a scientist at heart. The open source community, these guys provide to the open source community, and these other guys, they're completely locked down and they are stealing from the open source community, but they're not contributing.
Both open source and the scientific community.
Yeah, so you're passionate about this, Anders, and I love it. But the interesting thing is, it's almost like you have now in the same industry, some companies are going more the patent path or proprietary path, and some are truly contributing open source. And then you can say what you like about the core business and all that. But from the research and open source perspective, I find this really interesting that even on the top giant, both exist, so to speak. Any comments?
Oh, I'm so eager to go into this. You know what? I add that to the list. We can have like who is the best tech giant? I think it's an interesting discussion, but it's more from a societal kind of thing.
Yeah. So we are 5 minutes in and already in the rabbit hole here.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, the ugly about the tech giants, and I add that to the list.
We had so much fun discussing this, so let's take it on air. I like it.
But going back to the patent, so for one, you're currently pursuing a patent, and you're going to do it mainly yourself, or are you?
We have a team. We are working on it as a cross-functional team, actually, of different experts, and we get help from a law firm.
And it's going to be filed in Sweden, EU, US.
It's an EU patent.
EU patent.
It's the second one that I'm filing for the client.
Yeah, and I guess EU, or do you have a good sense, I'm not an expert in this at all, but do you have a good sense for the differences between EU patents and US patents?
I think it's mostly a question of where you start. You can always expand your patent across different locations and so on. I guess it's just how high is the entry hurdle that you want to take, right? You want to start simple and then from there see what you can actually what is actually granted by the patent office, and what do you need to tweak to make it better, to make it more appropriate, and then you can kind of roll it out globally in the end if you want to.
I guess if you compare to the scientific community, you can have terms like the minimally viable publication.
Exactly, yeah.
And in this case, it could be minimally viable patent that you can think of, to have as many as possible in some sense to increase the valuation of the company potentially. Okay, but as far as I know, EU has a bit more higher demands on software patents, at least, that they have to have some more practical application, at least, and they have to describe that in a more clear sense. Would you agree, or do you have some?
Yeah, I think it's easier if you have some sort of hardware connection with your software, right? Yeah. But I looked into the patent trends for the EU, and it looks like computer science or like software is one of the trending fields for patents in the EU, and has been for the past 2 years at least.
Yeah. You think that's a good or bad thing?
The question is, why is that, right? Why does it pop up now? Is it like now we're feeling we need to protect everything, or is it because now there's a lot of innovation?
Perhaps the whole industry is going more software. It's like Tesla is not a hardware company; it's a software company, and that's why you need to patent more software than hardware these days. You think so?
Yeah, or maybe it's just the type of companies that use or innovate on software are different industries nowadays. I guess like more of the mobility industrial companies are really using software more as a core asset for their business.
I have no clue, but I think the line of thought that we are moving companies who are used to patent, but in different areas, are now becoming more mature in the software area. So they just naturally continue doing it in the software area. This is one dimension. And then I think it's also what you were alluding to. We are purely speculating, is that the maturity around computer science and the rate of innovation happening in this field now is somewhat maturing. So there's more going on simply.
Yeah, that's probably, and it's actually true. We looked into the academic research in that area as well, and we could see, the same trends, like the publications on that topic also spike.
So maybe if you see more publications, you see more research, more things coming out, the patent trend can.
And then there's probably some time lag before the industry.
But it's correlated.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the next steps for your patent? Can you estimate a bit, how much time do you need to spend on it? How much money does it cost to actually get a patent, if you just, in a rough sense were to estimate that?
It takes a few months, I guess, usually to go through the pre-application process. So you start with doing your own research, writing it down. Then you do a so-called novelty search. So you basically check what's already out there and review that and see if it kind of overlaps with your idea. And after that, you take a decision, do I want to proceed or not? And if you want to proceed, then you write the whole application text, which is like a big, long paper of 30, 40 pages probably. And you file that, and then you have to wait for a long time. So somebody at some point will read it at the patent office in a few months, and will get back to you. I think that's around 3 months or so before you get the first indication back. And then you have the possibility to rewrite it, to adjust it. So the answer is not yes or no. The answer is these parts are...
But at least if you were to estimate the cost of actually filing a patent, would you say it's at least a couple of 100,000 crowns, or?
It's a couple of €1,000 probably.
But if you include the working time as well?
Yeah, the working time is excluded there. So it depends on how many people you have, you need to.
So a couple of months of man labor, so to speak, plus a couple of thousands of euros to just file the patent from a fee point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember also, someone yelling at me because I, at some point, did go through a patent database searching for something, and I wrote about something in a very public forum, and I could see this patent here and that patent there, and I got yelled at. Do not ever do that, because if you get sued. If someone actually looks at your mail history or Slack channels and whatnot, that they can see you knew about this patent because you did the search and the homework on it, if you know it, you will get fined like 3 times more than if you don't know it.
All right.
Have you heard about this? Or?
I have not, no. I didn't have a personal lawyer sitting next to me.
So the tip from the coach, when you are doing your novelty search, don't
write that down in any kind of digital forum that later can be extracted when you get sued.
So someone can say that you knew.
Speak on the manual or analog kind of phone or something if you want to discuss these kind of things. Cool. Okay, with that, super interesting topic. Patents, no patents, pros and cons. But there are pros, and I think we have to acknowledge that. But there are also cons, of course. Right? Mm-hmm. Mirko Gontek, very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And you have a very interesting background, I think, with a master in art, right, in a number of topics. And you also have a very interesting PhD, which is actually very connected to what I did as well in my PhD, working with the semantic web and information retrieval. In your case, I was more into information extraction, but also speaking about, linked data, etc., and social web, etc. So, yeah, looking forward to hearing more about that as well. If you remember, it was some time ago.
It was in the Stone Age, yeah, similar to your PhD.
I'm much older than you. So.
Before we started, Anders was clear to point out it's half the time from your PhD to my PhD. I don't know if that's a claim or that is good or bad.
Yeah, it's double the time since I did my PhD. So.
And is that good or bad? Maybe.
It's just an indication of how old I am. So
exactly. 25.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get started a bit. And if we start with you, we have your background, of course, and we should go through it. But how would you describe yourself? Who is Mirko, if you just describe it from a more private point of view?
In a nutshell, yeah.
Yes, in 2 words or more.
Yeah, no, I'm a German living in Sweden, in Stockholm. I've been here for 11 years, working in the IT industry in data and analytics in many roles. Been working in consulting all the time at Netlight, and been working in mostly digital native companies. I've been part of some cool growth journeys, and have seen data analytics from different angles during that time, from data science, but also BI, data engineering. I mean, when I started here like 11 years ago, data science wasn't really a topic yet, right? Then it was called BI, and it was very different from today. So I think that was kind of, in a nutshell, is like enjoying this ride of data and analytics.
The data ride.
The data ride.
But if we start from your original type of education, was that in Germany?
That was in Germany, exactly.
Cologne, right?
It was in Cologne.
Yeah.
And what kind of courses and programs did you attend in the beginning?
Yeah, and now it gets really odd. So what I studied was actually 3 different things at the same time. I studied applied computer science, musicology, and linguistics, so English literature.
And why is that?
So
cool.
Now you want to know how is like poetry of the late 20th century going together with
poetry, rockstar, data.
Exactly.
But we must say as well, I mean, a very clear trend, I think, in this podcast has been the connection between computer science and music.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, we have explored it with a couple of guests. And is there a correlation here? We talked, there's several.
It's a lot. It's like 50%. Not 50, but 30%.
But it's almost so statistically we could probably go through it and argue there is a correlation.
Yeah.
I don't know why, though.
No, it's strange. So that's an interesting topic. But you started with all 3 at the same time? Or?
Yeah, and that's kind of a specialty of the German education system back then, I guess. So I studied at the humanities faculty at the Cologne University, and how it worked back then, at least, that was before the Bologna reform, was that you had always a combination of 3 topics that you had to combine, and you could combine whatever you wanted, essentially.
Interesting.
And the idea behind that is that you, through this combination, create new ideas, new fields of application. So there was this idea of kind of some sort of broad education within that humanities.
What do you think about that today? Do you think that's a good idea still, or?
Well, I enjoyed it personally, and I think it gave me a perspective that was a bit had an advantage to very narrow niched
but it also
sometimes.
Doesn't allow you to go as deep, I guess.
Exactly, it doesn't, and that's also kind of reflected in my whole career now that I'm working in consulting and I'm working rather broad than deep.
Yeah.
It probably has shaped me and how I think and how I am.
I would argue, and we have the in very, very interesting conversations with Annette Kolmos. She's a professor at Aarhus University, and in the engineering faculty. But we are talking fundamentally about how everything is changing when we need to have cross-functional teams, and we need to be T-shaped, or as Annette says, T-shaped is not enough. So here, and if you extrapolate on this with, where more and more things can be done with a machine, what's the value add of the individual, the person, and how do we interact? So I think this intersectional innovation topic, or mixing humanities, with multidisciplinary approach becomes core. In a data and AI driven society, also to find our feet, what is our value add? So I kind of think it's brilliant. Of course, you're not going to get as deep, but I don't know. I immediately when you say that, ooh, that's smart. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I would agree to that. And there's also this concept of range that you kind of to solve creative problems. It's probably better to have a broad profile, whereas if you have a very specific problem that you need to solve, then it's good to go deep. Like, I don't know, playing golf, it's good to train over and over again the same thing. But, solving creative problems that we face every day at a creative job.
This is such a rabbit hole.
It is, yeah. But also in AI or like in that field, I agree that, the combination of tech with understanding for business is probably a super high value in my experience.
And you open up such a Pandora's box. I'm not going to go there, but I claim that we need to change from economies of scale and efficiency focus to economies of learning and adaptability focus. So we need to change the way we look at how we organize and how we understand the way we move forward and innovation and all this. And all of a sudden then you need to understand in what context you're innovating, and then tech will be the enabler. So if you don't have both angles, it's going to be very hard, right? So
exactly. I mean, it's also two different problems that you can solve with AI. It's optimization, like making things that exist faster, cheaper, and so on, better. Or you can do the transformation, that you create new ideas from new possibilities through AI.
So if you have the tech capability, you can first principles reinvent the way we look at the problem or look at the business model and do something completely different. So here creativity becomes a core asset, what you're going to use AI for, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I have to say that was not the intention I started studying.
I mean, I think that's also connected to another type of discussion we have had in the past, which is, are job roles going to get increasingly specialized or generalized? Are we going to have, like a data engineer labeler thing, or are we going to have a more of a generalist kind of role? So I think some argue, and I would agree, that we are seeing right now an increased level of specialization. So to build any kind of system, you need to have people with different roles, and that set of roles that you need to have is increasing right now. But I don't think it's potentially a very scalable solution. I don't know. And you lose potentially some of what you're claiming, the ability to be creative, if each single person is getting increasingly specialized. Do you think so as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. I mean, it's probably related to how big the teams are that you're working in, right? If you are just a one-man show, you have to be very broad, and you can, as one person, solve the problem. But then if you want to scale this concept to a larger organization, you need more people. And then suddenly it's very hard to find like 10 people or 20 people who are all super broad and have the same direction still. So it's much easier to split it up into different roles and still keep it together somehow with a kind of central role that knows how to use the data engineer in the best way, or machine learning engineer.
And isn't there's a quite simple hypothesis can be that we really need both. So in order to go all the way down in the deepest dungeons, you need to be a specialist. So we need to have specialist roles. Then these need to be organized in a cross-functional team. Mm-hmm. And then we need to have federation, orchestration, navigation. So we need to have roles also to be the glue between different specialists, or, so then obviously we have super specialists working with generalists that can talk to the specialists. Mm-hmm. And I think the way we organize an organization, operational level, tactical layer, executive layer, will not be the same. And then we will need both.
Yeah. And what you mentioned is a bit the data translator role, right? The person who is on a machine learning team or data team, and kind of keeps the connection to the business stakeholders and makes sure that we don't build a solution that is actually not valuable for the business.
Yeah, and to expect every super specialist to also be a specialist in business and domain is impossible. And then I argue there are new roles that we don't really have in our organizations, which is about orchestration, harvest, and reused. I mean, like, if you really want to scale data and AI, how do we reuse AI from a team over here? We need to really understand the feature and how the context over here in order to port it to this context. So here we have completely new roles that is sort of in this tactical orchestration layer of the future company. So there are so many aspects of why we need generalists and specialists.
And also, from my experience, I'm probably biased because I'm working a lot in consulting and have a lot of colleagues from consulting. But the best consultants are those who have worked very deep at some point in their career, right? If you know what you're talking about in depth, at least for some topic, you have really an edge over somebody who has only worked in a very data translator.
I like what you say. That it's actually one of my recruitment techniques as well. Speak about something you have done at depth, mm-hmm. and explain what you did. I think it's actually Elon Musk's interview technique as well. That speak about some problem you have worked with and describe what you did, mm-hmm. and you can tell very quickly if they didn't really were the main contributor of that problem or the solution, if they can't explain it. But if they can, and they have at least at some point worked at something that really, really deeply, that's a really good sign.
Yeah, it gives credibility as well.
Cool. And just to close the topic, perhaps we have spent too long time here just starting your studies as well. But given the three disciplines that you studied in computer science, musicology, and English, I guess it's obvious that you have most use for computer science, but have you seen any direct uses or value from having knowledge in musicology or English?
Actually, yes. In musicology specifically, one of the areas there that I studied was cognitive science, but in the humanities angle of cognition, right? But that was my first touch point with artificial neural networks. That was in computer science, modeling how the brain perceives music. Right. So there is actually some sort of connection.
Mm-hmm. To music in what way? Is it just the ability to perceive or sense music, or what?
Yeah? So I think like music perception works quite similar to language perception. Understanding of language is kind of closely related to understanding of music, or translating music into emotions or feelings in you.
Cool. So you did your studies, and then for some reason you started the PhD work. Why and why did you choose doing that?
Yeah, good question. Like, why do people start PhDs? I think I was just curious about the topic. I mean, information retrieval was what I have studied a lot during my university career, and there was a lot of things going on in that area at that time. I think it was the time when Google just started the Google Books library initiative, like driving around with a scanner in the libraries in the world, scanning books. So what could you do with that knowledge? That was a topic that I worked on in my university time.
Did you actually help out with a specific Google books project?
No, but in that field, I was working actually on a research project where we had a similar concept where we scanned medieval charters, like handwritten documents in European archives to make them accessible for humanities research.
Nice.
Then building that software to make it accessible is where I came from. And then the next step was, okay, how can we use also big data sets to get some sort of added value from it? So that's where I started. And the reason why I did my PhD, I don't know. I guess curiosity, lack of better ideas. Anyway, I got hooked and stayed in academia for a while then.
And I'm so eager to stay here a long time, but we should try to keep it short here on the PhD thesis. But if we start by the end, perhaps, and what were the main contributions you would say of the thesis work?
Yeah, I pulled together 3 research areas. One was machine learning, recommendation systems. The second being big data engineering. And third one being semantic web or information retrieval in the semantic web. So what I did essentially was building a search engine, which was also a discovery engine based on data from the social web. So back then, the social web was essentially social tagging systems or social bookmarking systems. There was Delicious, was the product from Yahoo. It was the biggest social bookmarking system where you could access public bookmarks from
so people helped out tagging or doing bookmarking in existing, was it like web pages or was it?
It was when you store a bookmark in your browser, you could make this public and then you could get the information of websites connected to tags like keywords, but also to users. And then you could use that information to build recommendation systems on top of that.
And if we go through the 3, I guess, most people they know machine learning, of course, recommender systems, I guess most people know as well. What type of recommender system were you working with? Some people differentiate between, collaborative filtering and content-based recommender systems. How would you describe the type of recommender systems you worked with?
That was purely collaborative filtering that I've used there.
And how would you describe that? What is collaborative filtering?
So if you think about what recommendations do, they usually have some sort of content or like documents that you want to make accessible to people, right? And then there's usually a popularity curve, and that curve is usually kind of a long tail curve, right? You have some content which is super popular, like some websites, some products are bought by many, many users. And then you have a long tail of content that is not very popular. And what recommenders can do is to leverage that long tail of that curve and to boost the right things from the long tail to the right users. And collaborative filtering, the idea there is that essentially users who have liked X also like Y.
Right. So instead of going through just like, here are the most popular books or whatever, or songs or movies, without, personalizing in any way, you can simply look at what you have read or watched before and just look at what other users have watched the same thing and what have they watched I haven't watched and recommend that.
Yes.
Would that be
that is it, yeah.
Cool. You mentioned big data engineering. Can you just elaborate a bit more? What did you mean with that?
Back then, the challenge was to scale recommender systems. All the fancy frameworks and libraries that we have available and technologies now didn't really exist back then. Hadoop was just a thing then. Yeah. That was, now we're talking like 2006 or so.
Yeah. So Google has started with their kind of Hadoop things, but it wasn't really available in an open source
yet,
way.
Right?
I think Hadoop was public.
When is MapR published? When is that?
I don't know, but Hadoop was it?
That must have been around that time.
Yeah. Just in the beginning, I think.
I don't want to say anything wrong now.
I mean, Google started in like late 90s, and they started off, of course, from doing the big data. What was the Hadoop name in Google? It was something else.
Would you argue that the research or the work done in Google, I mean, like they needed to solve a data problem with tech that didn't exist, so they invented it more or less? Is that the origin before Hadoop? Is that how you see it?
I would argue that the whole MapReduce era that they started with, was the reason that they open sourced something called Hadoop later. But it originated. I probably have some other people doing something similar, but they made it work at least.
Yeah, that's how I remember it.
Yeah.
And are we talking 2005 or 2009 or in the 90s even?
I mean, 90s, Google didn't basically exist. Exactly. They started in the end. But I think Hadoop probably started around that time, 6 or 7, or I don't know.
Yeah,
exactly.
2000, mid 2000s, something like that.
Yeah, Google it. But in essence, you're working on a problem that doesn't really have you can't discuss this problem with today's eyes. You need to put yourself back in where were we in 2006.
So to scale like recommendation algorithms was a challenge back then. So the first, I used a framework called Taste, and the version was 0.1. It was the first, it was a recommender system framework with a couple of algorithms, and it got later wrapped into or became Apache Mahout, which was an Apache framework, and that got then wrapped into Spark later. So there was some evolution steps in between now and back then.
And like I say, Hadoop was actually launched in April 1st, 2006.
So it was quite
it was quite on the money.
On the money. Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so you try to find a big data way using MapReduce-based techniques to do recommender systems in some way.
Exactly, and combine that with linked data or semantic web technologies to build essentially, today you would say a knowledge graph, so a graph of connected concepts, connected users that you can publish.
So how would you describe semantic web then? What is the semantic web for people that haven't heard of that term before?
So it's the idea is that semantic web was supposed to be a layer on top of the normal web, the World Wide Web, the World Wide Web, yeah. And there were some technologies like RDF and ontologies to essentially link, name concepts. Like, you would create an entity, which would be a text file, HTML file with your name, and then you would link it to Henrik, another entity, and you would describe that link as friends or colleagues or something, and you build a network of that.
And this is ontologies.
Essentially that's the semantic web then.
I guess you can phrase it like machines at that time at least were too stupid to understand the human web, so you need to have a special web that was much more structured, right? And then you have these kind of RDF frameworks.
But because this is its own field, right? And now we are using words that may be very common for several people, but not for everyone. So we are using a word ontology here, which I think is a quite central concept in what we are talking about now. What is an ontology?
An ontology is a description of relationships between objects.
Objects, yeah.
And kind of relationships, but also hierarchies. So describing a thing as a sub-concept of another. An example, but like a car and a bicycle are both vehicles. So an ontology would describe this relationship between the three of them.
And what is RDF?
RDF, what does it stand for? I don't even remember.
Resource Description Framework.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a language similar to HTML to
focus on
to describe ontologies in a format that can be published on the web.
So RDF is the protocol or the way we describe things in a structured way, so we can build an ontology. Or use it in an ontology.
RDF is like what HTML is for websites.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's based on XML, and it's just a schema that makes it possible to formulate triples usually. So the triples is basically some kind of object with a relationship to another object, and that forms a triple. And you can have different schemas on top of that, and that you can have over that the old thing. I have courses in semantic web, so and then you have ontology web language on top of that.
Maybe
description logic that actually could formulate, what the relationship really means, etc.
And there's this sect. I'm joking. I mean, like many thought, and I think that's why I also did the research here, that we need something like this, the semantic web and all that, and we have been trying to figure that out, and now maybe we have now we talk about knowledge graphs, and this is still very much alive and kicking, but I think there was also at this point in time, 2005-06, we thought this was going to be even bigger. I would argue.
It was a concept that was pretty big back then, but it didn't really take off. No. And I think maybe one of the reasons was that the whole concept of semantic web was not only to build ontologies, but also to make those publicly available, like the World Wide Web, right? And maybe there was a lack of incentive for content providers to do that, because as a company, you can also build ontologies for yourself, and you can probably find more efficient ways to represent ontologies or to make them process them in your software,
in your context.
Yeah, exactly. Then to publish it publicly on the web using these technologies. So if you think about concretely, storing these triples that you mentioned in databases is like not trivial. You need to create a new database technology in order to query those triples and so on. So it's probably much more efficient or easier to go for your old relational database and build your own custom software on top of that to build ontologies. Yeah. And maybe that was the reason why it didn't really fly in the end.
And what's your view here? Because I know you spent a lot of work on this, and you kind of left.
Yeah.
You're delusionized.
I was sad that it didn't take off. But
what was the promise, and why didn't? What was the promise that it had?
It was really beautiful in the sense that it was possible to formulate something with very, very clear meaning. That's what semantics come from. It had an exact and unambiguous meaning. It sounds like beautiful from a math point of view. And it was developed by a set of academics that used like this description logic, formal logic, to try to define this. It was very beautiful from a scientific point of view, but completely useless from a practical point of view.
And why is it useless?
Really hard to, for one, understand. But secondly, it was not flexible and it wasn't expressive, and you couldn't really formulate the type of meanings that you wanted it to do. So it was completely replaced, I say, instead by other things that was much simpler. So, today, if you want to have machines to speak to each other, you just build a REST API with JSON, protocol sending stuff around. And that was much more expressive and much easier to use. Not as beautiful. So
the problem here is that this is a theoretical, idealistic idea, but when you put it in the practical, dirty world, it has a very hard time it doesn't really simplify to build concrete systems faster or better.
Yeah. It's like a beautiful scientific ideology, but doesn't really work in practice. Mm-hmm. Or what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. It was very academic from the start, yeah. And it never really made the leap into the industry.
Could it? Is it still a valid idea that it could if you work on it?
I guess now the time is over, right?
Today
we moved on.
We see the big language models, the large language models that we will have in use, and they can work directly with the text, with the images, with the even hyperlinks that we do have. And of course, they can then instead automatically create this kind of machine representation. So instead of having companies that needs to publish both the human and the machine content, now you just need to publish the human content, and then you have intelligent AI systems that can automatically do the conversion, I guess.
But now you describe my PhD a bit, because that was a bit what I've done there, that I kind of analyzed those social tagging systems or data from them, processed them with recommender systems, clustering, hierarchical clustering, and outputted the RDF triples or the semantic web content from that.
And that sounds awesome.
It was an awesome idea, right?
It was.
So was it a successful PhD or was it, we have had such a great idea, but was it successful in the terms of what you're trying to achieve?
For me personally or for the world? For the world, probably didn't matter so much. For me personally, it was a fun 4 years.
But did you get to the point where you could prove it make something work?
Yeah, I actually built like a search engine. Like I had a website up and running where you could search social tagging systems. It was like
so in essence, you could take your idea and what you were thinking to a working prototype.
Yes, that's what I did.
That's a success in my
success for me, but then I had no users on that website.
How did that search engine work? If you try to explain that, what was the difference between normal search engines and the one you built?
So in addition to the search engine, I also added recommendations into the search results. So you didn't only get like a ranked result of websites for keywords that you search for, but you got also personalized. The ranking was personalized based on a recommendation system. So you could also navigate concepts to discover. So it was the idea to combine search with discovery.
I like it.
So basically you can say that the collaborative filtering aspects basically say that you understand what you like based on your history, and you can see other people that have similar history to yours. You have then, presenting results based on that type of history in some way.
Yeah, and then also recommended other search terms for you to look into.
Flip the search term. I love it.
Sounds like a very beautiful
That's
idea.
a beautiful idea, actually.
Let's make it a thing.
So and were you ever at that point in time, I'm sitting on a new Google here? Were you thinking about starting or doing something? Or
no, I was not, and that was also, I guess, at the end of my PhD time, I was really ready to leave academia and go into the real industry, because I was a one-man, everything was alone, right? I was sitting in my room there for 4 years, writing a thesis and coding something. And that was the mind-blowing change when I started in consulting, that I suddenly had like a lot of colleagues working with me, and the iterations were much faster, and that was a fantastic moment for me. And I would never go back to academia now.
I made the switch as well. I started in academia and I continued for some time, and I even thought, I will never leave academia. This is the proper place if you properly want to, produce knowledge in some way. But I left, and I must say, I basically say the same thing that you did right now. For one, you have to spend so much time, doing. Did you continue after the PhD at any time to, do research project in academia, doing the funding? Okay. So you didn't have to do all this kind of, writing funding applications and being a bit subjective in how you write them, etc. And then the slowness, I guess, the time before you actually have something that provides value for society in some way is very long, so to speak. And then when you move to industry, it goes so much faster, so you can actually provide some use, some value in a faster sense. Right?
Definitely. Yeah. And also the support that you have by getting access to infrastructure like computers, like just ordering a server at the university. It's like a project.
Yeah. What do you think about that in general? We should move to Netlight then, and how you came in contact with that. But are you a bit afraid about the future for academia?
Yeah, I am. I think it's a bit concerning that, in order to make good or impactful research in the field of AI or computer science in general, you probably will want to work at big tech companies and not in academia, right? And the concerning thing about that is, of course, that who drives the agenda? Should the tech companies drive the research agenda, or should we have a more democratic way to decide on research strategies, innovation strategies?
We always get into the same topic. I'm trying to avoid using the term now. We have this term, that we call the AI agenda. The AI divide, and it always gets back to this some way or form. But would you say, for one, do you agree? Do you think that the big tech giants are driving the research agenda these days?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. obvious question, but still, some people may not understand or believe that. And we also seen the big brain drain. I mean, the reason for this is not because the universities are bad. It's just that, they
tech giants bought them all.
Yeah, they employ them, and there's a big brain drain from academia into tech giants, and then of course they will drive the agenda in some way. So, can you think about any way to fix this, or should we simply allow this transition to happen, or do you think?
I think it's not only a problem of computer science. This divide exists in many aspects of society, right? It's also in politics and
so valuable
public services, and there's also a brain drain there. I think I don't have an easy fix here. I think it needs to be addressed. Yes.
But not an easy fix, but should we work on it?
I think we should. Yeah.
Why? Why don't you?
Well, because I want that our society is shaped by not by the agenda of a commercial company.
No, you want a higher purpose for society.
Isn't it probably that it's dangerous when the power goes to the hands of the few, so to speak? Is that the main problem, you would say, or? Yeah,
it goes to a few, but also to a few not elected for that purpose, right?
Yeah. And none in Europe, basically, I would say. Okay, awesome. Okay, but that's an interesting topic in itself, academia versus tech giants.
Sorry for being such a spoiler when you want to move ahead. I just wanted, for my own personal amusement or knowledge, could we make the link, finalizing your PhD in semantic web topic? What's the linkage now to what we now describe as knowledge graphs, and we have the companies like Neo4j and all that stuff? Is this something completely different? How would you contrast or relate or correlate what you were doing and what semantic web is all about with what we now talk about as knowledge graphs?
Knowledge graphs and the semantic web kind of solve the same problem to make to build ontologies, or build like knowledge graphs, to build like relationships between things. But knowledge graphs don't necessarily pursue the idea of making this public on the web and making it part of the World Wide Web.
So a knowledge graph is, please help me here, is that just, this is another way of representing data. We have a relation in a database, that we can have different ways of structuring data. And now we have this way of structuring data that is useful in certain use cases.
It's just the most efficient way to store this kind of relational graph data.
So it's not a relational database anymore. It's a knowledge graph.
Exactly. It's a different technology to store data.
Be clear about the terms here. I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm learning.
So we have graph databases like Neo4j and so many others.
Thank you.
And that's one thing. And we also have, graph neural networks. They also operate on the same data structure. And that's very interesting field in say, but I think knowledge graphs is something else potentially.
Okay.
And please disagree if you don't agree. But
no, I'm open. As a layman here, I'm trying to understand the definitions. You now said graph database is this. So what is knowledge graph?
Yeah. I mean, if you take the most common one, and Google has a knowledge graph, and when we search for something, you can see to the right or in the top some kind of fact sheet saying what's the who is Trump, and you can see some knowledge about him. He was born there, his age is that, and blah, blah, blah. They have a knowledge graph about the world in some way, or about some field. So that is basically what you also spoke about before. You have objects and relationships to them with knowledge. But graphs can be so much more. Graph databases is just the data structure, and you can use it for a knowledge graph potentially, but knowledge graphs by itself is an application of something that uses the graph.
So this is very useful because me not knowing the lingo correctly, as I took a graph database company Neo4j, but I put the header or the label of knowledge graph, which is actually not then correct.
You can think about social networks. Just another application of graph databases or graph structures. that is not potentially the same as knowledge graphs.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is graph database as a way to organize instead of relational database. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can. It's a different thing.
I'm learning. Thank you.
But I have my subjective thoughts about knowledge graphs, and I know some people have high hopes for it. I think we need some more soft knowledge graphs. As long as we move in that direction.
What is a soft knowledge graph?
That's a good one.
Should we talk about this?
If you flip these comments, you correct us, then you know what is a soft. Yeah, let's go.
So there is actually a very big controversial discussion right now on Twitter, etc., in the last couple of weeks about AI and especially about deep learning versus symbolic AI. And we have some people like Gary Marcus, and then Jan LeCun, on two different sides here. And Jan LeCun wrote famously like a week ago, "Put up or shut up," in a tweet. And he was a bit tired, I think, that we have so much people working on saying, symbolic AI is very important. And I can agree, but it depends on what you mean with symbolic AI. If you mean the type of description logic used in semantic web, in the ontology web language, for example, that's not the future, I would argue. That's my very subjective view of it. But if you then speak about symbolic as Gary Marcus speak about, like AlphaZero, for example, or AlphaGo, where they wrote that kind of AI system to play chess or Go or whatever, they of course had deep neural networks in it, but they also had like a Monte Carlo tree search. And then Gary, and I'm probably paraphrasing here, but he argues that is symbolic AI, that the Monte Carlo tree search is more or less a hand-coded kind of logic or reasoning that is combined with deep neural networks, and they together form a hybrid AI system. And if that's what you mean with symbolic AI, then I agree. That's something that any kind of, or most, I would say, AI system that even use deep learning have to have in some way. But then you can, this is a big gray zone. I think people are confusing terminology here in what they mean. So going back to knowledge graphs and soft knowledge graphs versus hard knowledge graphs. Hard knowledge graphs would be the description logic, hard, GoFi, traditional kind of logic-based knowledge graphs. That everything in the knowledge graph is encoded in RDFs, for example. Mm-hmm. That I don't think is potentially a viable thing unless you have automatic way to create it, like you said. Then potentially you can find a way to solve it. I think a better way is to create like internal representation automatically. That is done in a soft way, like a feature vector, some kind of latent representation that describes these are the concepts that you have right now. Like these kind of neural differential machines that produce some kind of memory that was done in a soft way. You don't know exactly what each neuron or number means, but it's something that is being learned. And it's much more similar, I would argue, to the human brain, that don't have symbolic hard logic running there. It's some kind of soft logic in the human brain that is being built up. And then you can do symbolic reasoning in a soft way in the brain. It's very fluffy, the way that the human brain reasons. But if that is what you mean with symbolic reasoning, then I'm all for it. And that is what I mean with soft knowledge graph and soft reasoning. Do you see my point, or do you?
All right, maybe. Not sure if I follow through all the way.
It's a really big
So
thing.
in this sense, instead of hard-coded, hard knowledge graphs, hard-coded or following the triplets and all that, there are, AI ways that you can find clusters. You can find logical areas, softer logical relationships.
You can build soft concepts, if you call it that. You can build some kind of soft latent representation of symbols, of pieces in the knowledge graph. But that shouldn't be like a single discrete object in that case.
Okay, yeah.
Wow, this was a rabbit hole, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Okay, let's leave that for now.
So much fun, though.
Okay, you went into Netlight somehow. How did that happen? How did you get in contact? Why did you choose to join them?
Yeah. Many questions in one. I guess I didn't leave Cologne, Germany during my whole university career, and I was ready to. I wanted to go abroad, go out into the world, and I was a bit attracted to Scandinavia, specifically in Stockholm. I liked the IT industry back then already. It kind of was developing. There was Spotify was one of the companies, one of the brands back then. There were a couple of more. And I also knew that I wanted to work in consulting because I liked that broad kind of work. I wanted to see different things and experience different companies. And then it was a lucky shot. I just applied in Stockholm, but also in France and in Switzerland. And the best match that I found was really Netlight, which was a small consultancy back then. We were 150, 160 people.
It's not that small. If you're
not that small, that's true. But compared to now, it was small. And Netlight just had an office opened in Munich. And so there was a connection, to Germany, which made sense for me. Yeah. There was an exit plan.
So Netlight is a Swedish founded company.
It's a Swedish founded company. The headquarters here in Stockholm. And now we have offices in all of Scandinavia and Germany, Switzerland. Back then it was only only Sweden, Norway, and Munich. Yeah, and I liked what I liked about consulting and specifically about Netlight was the way forward for me was I could work technically. At the same time, I could kind of experience different topics, different companies, different approaches. I had a couple of other interviews with other companies where I had to decide, do I want to become a technical person or a kind of consultant? And I didn't want to leave the tech behind. I wanted to continue that road. And that was really what I found here.
Cool. Did you move to Stockholm then, or did you?
I moved to Stockholm, exactly. Yeah. So I've been here for 11 years now. I was back in Germany for a few client engagements for a while, but basically I've been living in Stockholm.
Do you feel more like a Swede, or are you feeling like you want to go home to Germany still?
No.
Like when you go home and meet your parents, of course you're going home in one way, but
I feel like a Swede. Yeah, I feel like something in between, maybe, or both, German and Swede. I don't feel like a German anymore, not fully anymore, but also not like a full Swede, I guess. I don't know.
It's a weird, but for me, it's a relevant question because I did my university degree in Australia. Then I was back in Sweden, and then I went another stint and lived and worked in Australia for 3.5 years. So all up around 6.5 years. I definitely feel Swedish now. I'm not sure how Swedish I felt when I lived there, and I definitely feel like I have two homes.
I feel Swedish when I'm back in Germany, and I feel German when I'm in Sweden.
That's the point, isn't it? Isn't that the point, right?
It is.
It's like me, I'm from Kalmar, the southeast part of Sweden, and when I come to Kalmar, they think I speak, the Stockholm kind of Swedish in a horrible way. And when I come to Stockholm, I speak in a horrible kind of Kalmar type of Swedish in a horrible way, so you don't fit anywhere, or everyone thinks you're not a native.
But it's actually, elaborate on when you're in Sweden you feel German, and when you're in Germany you feel Swedish. Could you I think this is so true, but if no one has lived abroad, I think it's a good.
Yeah.
What do you mean with that?
It's really hard to describe, but I really feel at home in Stockholm. Of course, and I've been here for a long time, and this is my place. But still, there are some things that I guess I can understand them, but I can't feel them. So I don't have the same childhood memories than
exactly like this.
A Swedish person has, for example. I haven't seen the same childhood TV shows, and I haven't been to the school here, and so on. So I think there's
cultural cues, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. These things, I can't really relate to things in the same way. At the same time, when I'm back in Germany, I now have a different kind of perspective on things. Suddenly I feel like, oh, that seems odd. Why do we do it like this in Germany?
Exactly.
That I haven't seen or realized that before. But now I have this outsider perspective on things suddenly.
But I think this is a blessing. I've really thought a lot about this because sometimes, we had 3 years in Australia. 2 of my children are born in Sydney, and we had this fundamental conversation: should we become Australian? Should we move forever? And then in the end, we didn't, right? And maybe that's one of the hardest choices. Why the hell did we move back or whatever? But I think, so I've thought a lot about this. And for me, it's also this topic that you get an outside-in perspective on yourself and even how you are as a person. More relaxed in Australia and more a workaholic in Sweden. Don't ask me why, but yeah. So many things like that is a little bit like when you do a stint abroad, it changes perspective.
It's like a boot camp. And for me, it was like a boot camp. First you have to, they broke me down and then built me up from scratch. I mean, that's right. Moving here and not knowing where to buy food, and I didn't understand anything. But that kind of, I think it helped me. I mean, for me, it made me who I am today. It was like a great experience to become myself.
And then in the end, if I speak for myself, it's like really, really annoyed with some stuff when you live in Australia. That just works in Sweden. And then when you're in Sweden, it's like, oh, come on, how bureaucratic, or how, don't mess with my life. Let's do like the Aussies do, So it's also this topic that you see, it's a little bit like you get out of the bubble, you're so indoctrinated, but when you live in 2 different places, you get a little bit distance you can see through the bullshit a little bit as well. Like you can see through the bullshit, but you can also see, this is so fantastic. Stockholm is so fantastic. It's so good in these areas. So for me, it made me appreciate stuff more, but also understand, okay, this is actually a filter bubble in Sweden.
Yeah. And on a professional level, actually, it's quite funny because, Sweden has, or Stockholm IT industry has this edge in certain things. And when I go to Germany to our clients and offices there, they have another edge. And this is a really cool combination that we also use to make business actually. So we have, in Germany, looking at our data clients or machine learning clients there, we have a lot of the big companies who have large deployments, large organizations, large tech. In Stockholm, you work more with small, medium-sized enterprises where we maybe move a bit faster and more creative, but we don't roll it out so largely. So it's different challenges, and using those learnings and reversing it and going with the learnings from Stockholm to our Munich clients and vice versa.
Cross-pollinate.
It's cross-pollinate, yes. That's really useful.
And you're today the global head of AI analytics, right?
Yeah, that's what I call myself. Yeah, we don't have these roles at Netlight. We don't use roles so much, but essentially, I've been around for the longest, working with data and analytics in Netlight, and I'm holding together our community of data and analytics consultants, and try to build this community internally, but also build our brand or our services around that.
But I think you need to introduce Netlight to the audience, because in my opinion, just by going into Netlight's webpage, it's not the normal consultancy. So if you go into the normal webpage of Netlight, and you're trying to figure out what are the dimensions they're working on. Okay, digitalization, something. Come on, I want to know if they do AI. I want to know if they do BI. I want to know if they do service design. None of that. But you talk a lot about the values, the culture, and the mindset. So for me, very, very interesting. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Netlight?
Yeah, it's philosophy. A very interesting company. And we are a IT consultancy. Based in, like, the headquarters in Stockholm. We have offices in all Scandinavian capitals, but also in a couple of German sites: Munich, Hamburg, Berlin in Germany, in Amsterdam, in Zurich. We are 2,000 people. And what we do is we do consulting for anything that you need in order to make a digital innovation in your business. So, we have people with all kinds of roles, everything from developers for different tech areas, but also product management, also IT management, data science, data engineering, UX, everything that you need at some point to make a digital business successful and innovate on that. And
that sounds great. And you mentioned a number of roles now, and I think this is also connected to what you spoke about, specialization and different roles. What are the main roles that you can provide as a service, so to speak, from Netlight to companies? You mentioned data engineer, data scientists, product management. Can you go? What are the top ones that you would say you can provide?
The roles that I just mentioned, I guess, are the top ones, like developers. Like
software developer in a general sense? Or?
Yeah, we have specialists for anything you want, essentially. Backend developers,
front-end,
C++
backend,
developers, .NET.
React stuff.
And usually I would say, like, we don't have anybody who does .NET for 5 years. We have usually a bit broader profiles. Okay. Because we're trying to stay as relevant as possible. And that's also why we are not a .NET consultancy or we are not a data science consultancy, because we want to stay, we have to stay fluid in order to stay relevant for the market, because the market is also fluid. Things that are hot topics now were not hot topics 5 years ago.
But how do you develop those skills? I mean, I guess you want to provide a broad set of competences that you can help company with.
Yeah.
But then you want to continue to evolve as a company in Netlight, and you want to have this kind of broad coverage in the best way you can do. So either you can say that you want people in Netlight to be increasingly broad, generalists, and you say that you shouldn't just be a back-end engineer, you should also be a front-end engineer, or you should be a data scientist or a data engineer or a DevOps person or whatever. How do you do personal development in Netlight? How do you build up people that have? We don't manage people. Our people manage themselves and manage their own careers, right? And we don't tell anybody you need to be more broad or so on.
So please let's go deeper on how Netlight works, because fundamentally the whole management principle is more closer to holacracy, adhocracy and stuff like that. And maybe not everybody knows about these concepts, but I think it's very, very interesting to understand how Netlight works in this sense.
You can think of Netlight as a network of IT professionals, right? We are hiring people mostly from university graduates. And our idea is to get people with high potential, get the best people with the highest potential in the company, and then build their careers, or let them build their careers and give them everything they need in order to grow.
But they have a full-time employment.
They have a full-time employment at Netlight, yeah.
I mean, that sounds great. So you bring them in rather young, and you can start to help them build their careers in some way.
But we don't know what the best career is for a person, right? That's on the person to figure that out and to have that opinion. And that's where it kind of makes this connection between the market and the talent management, because it goes hand in hand. You cannot really decouple them. So we don't know what the hot topic will be in 5 years. Of course, nobody knows.
But what is your fundamental then management or governance structure? Is it holacracy, closer to that, or is it something else? Because it's not Tayloristic, or how are you structured then in order to be able to? That's fantastic that someone can go in and build their careers, but how do you fundamentally operate? How does it operate?
We operate by personal relationships. So we are a very tightly knit network of people who know each other.
At 2000?
At 2000, yeah.
Wow.
And we communicate a lot. We also have, we have mentorship as a concept. So
that's right.
Senior people mentor newer people in their career. We have also, I would call it interest groups, or like some sort of experts, guilds, whatever you want to call it. We call them competence cells sometimes. But essentially, when you are a data scientist, you will have a lot of peers around you, and you would organize in peer groups to learn together, to go to events.
Who's the peer group's manager?
There is no manager. That's the funny thing. It's a flock concept, right? So it happens automatically. So we provide the platform. We have kind of the office. We have the tools to make connections. We introduce people to each other, and we give people the opportunity to explore topics. We have internal conferences for knowledge exchange. We also invite external people to get new input in.
Does it become an informal leadership based on seniority? Because if you're a flock, even a flock needs to find a direction.
Yeah, it's very informal, and we call it leadership instead of management, right? We have leaders, but the leaders are not explicit leaders, so I can't manage people, but I can influence people. I can be a role model to others. I can coach them and tell them what I think is a good move in their career, but I can't force them to make that move.
And just to be very, very practical, how do you concretely hire and how do you fire in this context? I mean, like concretely, some people are not, or maybe you never fired anyone, but how does that work?
We need to find these people who want that, right? We cannot hire people who want to be managed. We cannot hire people who are waiting who want to have the career path on paper printed out, right?
But if you have 2,000 employees, at some point in time, someone jumped on the Netlight train that wasn't really understanding what they jumped into. Because I think this is fantastic, but I also think this needs to be a very chosen path.
Yeah. We put a lot of effort on recruitment, so we don't outsource recruitment. Recruitment or talent acquisition is one of our core business functions, and so is sales, and those two work together, right? So we have 3: talent management, talent acquisition, the sales, and then we have the consulting business, the delivery, so to speak, like going out to the clients and delivering. Those are our core 3 business functions, and we are starting to recruit very early on. So we have building a strong brand at universities. We also go into the universities for events and for finding those people already in the middle of their studies, not afterwards.
How do you do that?
So we have mentorship programs already at the universities where we provide like coaching, mentoring for students.
Do you have internships as well? Or?
We do have some, I don't know what it's called nowadays. We do have some summer sort of internships. We have summer jobs, and we have programs to give people opportunities to try out.
But how do you handle personal development then? If you don't want to manage people but lead them, but do you have some way to still guide them with personal development?
Yes, we do, and we work a lot through a role modelship, but also through finding the right opportunities for people. That's really where sales comes in, right? So we don't want people to be told what they should work, what client they should pick, but we want people to actively play a role in finding their next engagement and connect our sales people know the industry, they know all the opportunities that are out there. And we need to connect those opportunities with what is it that I need as my next step in my career. And this is only possible with a very personal relationship between people.
Okay, but let me be a bit more concrete then. I mean, for younger people, you say you hire directly from universities. And I remember myself when I was in university, I thought, I was the best of everything. I knew much more than my professors. And you were a bit idiotic. There is this term for this, what is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
So the more you know, the less you think you know?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And the less you think you know everything. And I think that especially by doing a PhD, as you did as well, that was really an eye-opener for me as well. And meeting my PhD supervisor, he was really changing the way I looked at things and opened my eyes, so to speak, that I do know nothing, more or less. But still, you are working with a lot of junior people that potentially have that kind of misconception of the world, and they don't understand their own limitations.
I mean, I was one of them, right? I came out pretty cocky from academia.
Yeah. Me as well. But how do you handle that? I mean, you still want to grow people. You still want the people to understand, their limitations, and they want to make them develop and perhaps take courses or learn things that they don't know today, so they can be, the best for themselves and the best for Netlight in some way.
We trust people a lot. We trust everybody who we hire that they can do what they think they can do, what they say they can do.
Yeah.
And we throw people into the deep water usually early on in their career, right?
So you let them fail in some way?
We let them fail, of course, but we give a frame, right? We don't let people fail without a support network and without a structure around it.
You let them have a go, but with a mentorship there to pick up.
Yeah, we usually make sure that people find the deep end of where they are, right? It should always be challenging, but also not. We don't want to set up people for failure, of course.
No, of course not.
So in the beginning of the career, it's a bit more structured. We have a quite structured onboarding process where we onboard to our internal concepts, but also to the mentorship program that we have. We make sure that people get to know other relevant people and so on. So that's quite a structured approach in the beginning, and it gets less and less structured the more senior you become.
But I think this is fantastic, very interesting. But for me, it raises the topic of what should I recruit for if someone should be successful in Netlight. So personality trait. What is motivating you versus talent versus competence. How do you think about the ideal candidate from the Netlight perspective, but also this person will love it here. This person will not maybe thrive here.
We have to recruit for personality. We cannot recruit for skills, because we don't know yet what the skill hot on the market will be in 3 years or 5 years when we have grown this person.
So it's more personality and the way they are.
Absolutely, and there's a baseline, of course, right? So if you come out of KTH or some engineering school, you come with a certain technical baseline, and that we check, of course. But on top of that, that's not enough for us. On top of that, you need to have, the mindset and the desire to work like we were.
What is the mindset that you're looking for? If you're going to ace a Netlight interview with you, what are you looking for?
Well, you want to learn, right? You don't want to be in a niche. You want to be open-minded, explore the world that's out there, essentially. So somebody who knows, I want to work in .NET for the next 10 years. That's my thing. Probably not a good candidate for us.
Not great for someone else, but for this job is probably not the way you are thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else in terms?
Yeah, curiosity.
Curiosity, I was thinking.
Of course.
Awesome. That sounds great. And then you don't have strong titles or anything. I mean, some other companies, and I think, and one that you have worked a lot with as well, I think sometimes abuse titles a lot, and you have quickly growing from being lead of something to senior in something to principal in something and whatnot. What do you think about that in general? Is it something that...
we can't offer titles really, right? If you're into titles, we will probably have a hard time to retain you. Yeah. But that also comes with the consulting profession, right? As a consultant, it doesn't really make sense to have a title like, I don't know, what would that be? Lead consultant or whatever? I don't know.
I mean, if you go to McKinsey, you have a quite hierarchical ladder of, how you start until, what steps you are until you become a partner, right? And which is very much based on the law firm model, right? So, of course, in some parts of the consulting world, they have structured this quite successfully. Do I think it's relevant? I think it's very interesting to understand consulting and contrasting, for instance, the hardcore model of McKinsey versus Netlight is very different, of course. Yeah.
And I know some other websites, if you want to hire consultancies, you can specify, I want a level 1, 2, 3, or 4 consultancy. And then they have very strict definitions of what these levels of consultants does and knows. Yeah. And
I mean, to a certain extent, we do also think about what is the expectation on a consultant who has worked for 5 years, right? So there are also expectations on ourselves to have a higher impact and so on. And in actually interesting in data or analytics or AI space. We're just working on carving out a bit more. What are the different typical career journeys that we see for our people? Because that's a big question that somebody who comes fresh from university actually has. Like, what is my journey? What can I expect? What is possible? What is not possible? Right. So somebody who maybe comes out of university now and like wants to work on, I don't know, strategy, ML strategy for a client. Like, does it work? Does it not work? And if not, what do I need to do in order to get there? Like, what are the stepstones to that role? That's something we try to carve out a bit currently.
But I think understanding a career ladder or actually the human progression path is something that is really important and part of the whole game around talent management. And that's even where I think sometimes a large enterprise struggles with these new roles, because there's a very clear path if you're a business controller. But here we hire data scientists, and there's not even a job description, or an HR doesn't have you in the right. I'm talking enterprise speak now. They don't know are you a level 5? You know, what's your salary? You know, and I think a part of the maturity in our field, you kind of need to get there, even as a consultant, right? In order to have a concrete, someone asked a very concrete question coming out of university. You know, how should I think?
Yeah.
What do you think? Are we there? There's still so many paths here: BI, data science, machine learning.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. It's like this kind of concept of career journeys is a bit different from titles, right? We don't need titles to have a good career journey example.
I agree with this.
And this is what we're kind of, I'm thinking a lot about these days, like, because the data analytics or AI space is also a bit fuzzy, right? We don't really know what it means, or what is part of it, what is not part of it. We basically have come up with 3 areas that we believe is part of the data analytics bubble. One being data science and machine learning engineering. Second being advanced analytics and BI. And the third being data engineering. So this is how we split up the bubble.
Yeah, so basically you're highlighting a distinction between different parts here. And we had a lot of these conversations, by the way. And I think I really like how you have split up advanced analytics compared to at least machine learning and engineering. And the typical, the blurry point is the data scientist.
Yeah, exactly.
And then someone is called a data scientist, and then you scratch the surface, and then you are a machine learning engineer, and you are an advanced analytics guy.
And probably it's also, I don't see it as distinct areas, but people are moving around between them, and there's overlaps, right?
There's some sort of gravitational force towards where where are you coming from, or what is your main contribution. I see it as gravitational force. It's not black and white, right? It's overlapping circles. But there's a clear distinction between advanced analytics, doing machine learning for insights versus doing machine learning for recommender systems.
Exactly.
Simply put, right?
Exactly. And then it could be 5 bubbles instead of 3 bubbles, or 7. We landed at 3 just because you can keep it in your head and communicate it.
And those
easily.
3 were basically data science, machine learning engineers, it was analytics, and it was data engineering?
Yeah, exactly.
If someone pushed me to take it to 3 bubbles, I would do the same. And then,
I have a question to you though. How would you call the combination of those 3 bubbles?
Data and AI readiness.
Data and AI. Oh.
No. We can. That's a. Oh, I mean, like in the end, that's not enough, right? Because then you need to have value engineering. I mean, like simply put, value engineering, algorithm engineering, data engineering is one way of looking at this. And now I'm staying out of the BI advanced analytics space a little bit. This is good topics. I don't know.
Cool. We have like half an hour left, and we haven't even moved from the background area. So I think we should try to
go for it.
Close a bit the Netlight discussion, and perhaps you can end with a bit. Can you provide perhaps some major highlights from your time in Netlight that you can mention? Some interesting project you have worked with, and just go through them rather briefly.
Yeah. I mean, I had only highlights in my career. I feel very lucky to work where I work. I feel like there hasn't been any super boring assignment in my whole career, it feels like. But I've been at Spotify for a long time as a consultant in a time where the company grew a lot. It was like, 2000 and what was it? 17, yeah. I started there. I worked in the product insights function there. So, and that was, the time we had the IPO with the company, but also then relaunching the new free app during that time. So a lot of exciting, launching podcasts, a lot of exciting things that happened in that time. I learned a lot from that assignment. Even though I can't talk about the details.
But if you were to speak about the company in general, anything that is different from how Spotify operates to build a product compared to other companies, is it something that you think is special for them in the way that they do it, in terms of organization, in terms of how they have teams, how in terms of how they do agile work, in terms of whatever?
Yeah, one specialty certainly is the way product analytics works with product and user research. So in Spotify, we have product insights. We had product insights, which is a combination of analytics. It's called data scientists, but it's product analysts.
Yes.
And user researchers. So they're working in the same function.
Why do you think they call it data scientists? I guess
it was actually called product analysts when I started there. I think Asadi was here a long time ago, and she talked about it a bit. Yeah. It was renamed, I think, for hiring reasons, probably.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Of course it is. Okay, but there are some, one thing that they have spoken about a bit, and I have to do a shout out to Henrik Nyberg, who is a famous agile coach, I think, in Spotify, that does awesome visualizations, and I would really recommend anyone to look up his videos and presentations if they want to learn more about this. But they speak about the agile, type of work that they are doing, and potentially that's a bit different. Or what's your thinking about how to conduct proper agile development? Do you have any special thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think we had a pretty good and pretty formalized process to evolve the product. And this is, I can't talk about it because it's public information. And so if you think about the product development lifecycle, you want to start with exploring opportunities. Then you want to pick or prioritize opportunities. You want to build solutions for them, test solutions, refine the solutions, and then roll it out in the end. That's roughly the think it, build it, ship it, tweak it, product development lifecycle, right? And then if you think about the product analytics, and user research, it comes in at different points in that cycle. And I think Spotify is pretty good in defining which function comes in that cycle. So usually, or many times, the exploratory work or the new ideas come from user research. So there's a lot of user research being done at Spotify. Sometimes it comes from quant insights as well, but user research is pretty good in understanding why things like they are.
Quantitative and qualitative kind of user research, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I've worked mostly with the qualitative user research. But then, when you go further in the cycle, A/B testing, experimentation, that's when the quant side excels. Yeah.
And also for people that don't know it, but think it, build it, ship it, tweak it is one of the core mottos, right? That they have. So it's an interesting thing to have. Okay, cool. Spotify, of course. I mentioned.
I also worked at some other media was an industry I've worked in for a while. I was at a German video streaming website.
Can't you say the name?
I can say it because it doesn't exist anymore. It was called myvideo.de. It was essentially it started as a German YouTube clone.
I thought it was another one, but okay.
It's owned by ProSieben now, which is a big media TV company. And there I've worked on their search engine.
Yeah.
And recommendation engine there.
Cool.
That was a rather short, assignment, but super interesting topic, I thought.
What is the biggest difference when you have been consulting in Sweden versus in Germany?
There wasn't much of a difference, I would say. And that's also because, as Netlight, we bring the Swedish way of working to our German clients. We kind of exported the Swedish way of working.
This is actually part of the selling point.
I actually introduced the Swedish fika at the client even.
Perfect.
Awesome. And you have worked as a consultant for a long time, and you haven't worked you are a full-time employee as well. But if you were to elaborate a bit more, what do you think the main advantages or disadvantages of working as a consultant are?
Yeah, and here maybe I have to again refer back to what Netlight is doing, because consulting is not equal consulting. There are many types of consulting.
Good point.
And what we are not. If you start from why do people hire me or Netlight, it's usually either because they want to grow and they're growing faster than they can recruit. That means the client is usually in a very exciting phase.
Right.
Or the client wants to try out something or do something that they haven't done before, and they need external experts to solve this problem. So innovation. So that's also a very exciting phase the client is in. So I'm basically always coming into very exciting positive situations at my clients. And that's pretty cool.
Any negative consequences of working?
Well, sometimes you want to stay and also follow through and go down the rabbit hole.
See the whole thing through, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I asked you when you've done your PhD if you had any ambitions to do a startup. And I think you misunderstood. I wanted to leave academia. Oh yeah, no shit. But did you ever consider taking a great idea and go your own route, or being your own? I mean, have you ever had startup? Because there's a little bit like the benefit of being a consultant, the benefit of or values and pros and cons of working in an enterprise or in a context, and then the third route of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think I'm working as an entrepreneur. Actually, I'm not working in an enterprise. In an enterprise, that would mean I'm getting managed and.
No, for me, I mean, consultant is something. It's their own breed. I mean, I am a consultant, and I've been a consultant, and then I work for a while in line organizations, and then I mean, you are in your Vattenfall, in your Scania, even your Spotify, you are producing a product and whatever, but then you have the difference between. I've been working as a consultant. Okay, so not in enterprise, but now I want to start my own from scratch idea and maybe a search engine.
Yeah, in the sense of building software products, I can't really do that, right? I can do it on another level. I can do it in Netlight. I'm an entrepreneur in the company where I build the data.
Yeah, so you're
doing with data. I'm doing the business development.
Entrepreneurship.
So to speak. Yeah, entrepreneurship. Yeah, maybe that's the answer.
It can also, if we take the potential disadvantages, in some way you want to build an identity in some way, saying, this is really what I want to do, and I want to feel a strong connection to the brand in some way that I'm working for. That can potentially be a bit harder as a consultancy, would you say, right? Or
yeah. One drawback is also I can't talk about all my fun war stories so much, right? Because usually it's quite secretive stuff we're working with, and I'm not allowed to talk about the details of everything I'm doing. And I can't go to these big conferences easily because everything I do is owned by the client in the end. Right.
But also what Henrik spoke a bit about, if you start your own startup, in one way you have full control, in a way you actually decide the road ahead to an extent that perhaps you couldn't otherwise.
But here's the point that I think you made beautifully. There's different consultancies. You have consultancies that are very hierarchical and all this. And here in Netlight, in a way, you are within a context, but you can be entrepreneur, or do your startup thing for the global AI. How do you evolve the offering around AI, right?
Yeah, and
so that is based on Netlight as a company gives you kind of. I can understand how you can feel you're an entrepreneur even if you have a context.
And the process that I go through as a senior Netlight consultant, when I start talking to a client and find out what do they need, how can we help them, I staff a team, like I get my colleagues together, I get experts on board. And this is kind of building like a startup, right? It's building a solution. And the great thing is that I have access to all these experts. And having a startup myself would probably not give me the same access to experience, experts in whatever I need right now.
Have you ever been tempted to switch to a company that you have worked for and be a full-time employee there instead?
Not really. I haven't found a company that has given me anything better than I have, really.
Sounds great. Cool. I think we should potentially switch over to a bit more societal type of topics, unless we have something more professionally. We could potentially speak a bit about, given all the companies you have worked with and try to get them started on the digital journey in some ways.
So let's go to generic topic. Let's leave Netlight, but I think with your experience, also how you're working on and what you have experienced in how Netlight is a quite different beast, how it's organized. Do you going into data and AI, how do you understand the core fundamental topics of succeeding with putting data and AI? Let's talk about this. What are the key fundamentals to have data and AI value creation at scale?
That's a nice one. Oh my!
Is this a tech problem? Is it an organizational problem?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's all right. I mean, I think there is when I look at all the clients I've worked with, what it boils down to is that there is some sort of maturity journey that you go through when you evolve in that AI field or ML field. So I think the first step is usually to build some sort of technical infrastructure that you need. You need to have a database where you collect data. You usually start with some more simple things, and you need to set up this tech stack. That's usually where people started. So 5 years ago, building data lakes was the big topic in many clients, right? There wasn't really a clear, crisp use case. It was more this fuzzy idea of, data lakes is probably what we should do because the CEO likes the term.
But was that the right thing?
No, it was not, of course. But people have done it back then. And then the next step is actually the important step, and that's kind of adding the use cases on these data and establishing the value chain for machine learning or AI or analytics, whatever you want to do.
Let's say something now, because we have such a spectrum of how far people have come on this journey in Nordics. So if someone who hasn't really touched the big data space yet, what do you advise them to start? All of us that worked on this in the enterprise world in the last 10 years for Netlight, we kind of started in one end and everybody did the same. If I take a step back now, I'm kind of skeptical to how this came about.
Exactly. It was not
So if you now come to someone who is, I'm a laggard, I get it, but you know what? I want to hack the other guys. I want to do it right from the beginning. What would you, where do you advise them? How should they start?
I mean, my advice is always to start very small use cases, like pick a low-hanging fruit, a very niche use case.
Very concrete.
Very concrete, but also where you don't have to build like a gigantic infrastructure behind it to solve it. Right? And you have the data already. You don't need to go into data acquisition or something like that. So start with a use case that's easy to solve. It's a clear use case, and define the business value as well. And do this, build the whole vertical, like the value chain from getting the data, analyzing the data, build some sort of product from the data, and also make decisions for the business and measure back what you actually built.
I have the same view in my last conference keynote. So you're talking about get a very, very clear framed use case that you can truly understand and clear problem to solve. and then go narrow, but go the whole value chain to understand from ideation to production.
Definitely, yeah. And there's actually I think there is some sort of best practices how you do these, proof of concepts. And there also, I think the clients I've seen became a bit more mature and became also more mature in defining or structuring this process of building proof of concepts. Usually we want to start with some sort of use case scoping phase where we have a couple of days, sometimes a couple of weeks, where we just groom the use case and stress test the use case. And because I think often the ideas are quite vague, right? And it's not really, it sounds good in the beginning, but then when you start working on it, implementing it, it all breaks down.
Okay, so this is another pet peeve rant from me, how we have done a problem framing in the business and we think we're done. But we haven't even, we are 3 or 4 layers away from a concrete problem enough with the real metrics that you can have the right clarity on what you're actually trying to build. And I'm so jealous, by the way, when we talk to the guys who's been at Spotify, and with the metric is super clear what we're working towards. Sometimes. I mean, like, this is my impression compared to how fluffy the business requirements are when they come in. And I see it still, right? I'm not going to talk about customers, but okay, so we're ready to start building now. And I'm like, no, there are like 4 layers left. But now we're done. No. So this fundamental advice to groom the problem or shape the problem.
Groom the problem. And this grooming is really challenging if you have an organization where you have business and tech not working cross-functional, because the grooming actually means on the one side, you need to groom the business metric and the business problem you want to solve, but also you need to look into the data and understand, do I have the data that I need to solve this? And what is the data quality? So it's a both technical and business challenge.
Iteration. And then here now comes the cross-functional team very, very early.
Exactly.
The value chain needs to be, you can't bring in the techie guys later, or, the cross-functional team in its core needs to be there in the grooming phase.
Exactly.
It's the flipping back and forth. Sorry, Heinrich. I'm really passionate.
I know. I can hear it.
I'm so passionate, and you are spot on. I like it.
Perhaps some terms we could speak about that. One comes from Facebook, and one actually, I think, at least, perhaps not originated in Spotify, but at least they spoke about it a lot. If we start with the Facebook motto, it is move fast and break things. And if I just elaborate a bit more, it's better to put something in production quickly, and and also changes and iterations that you have on that product quickly, even though it may break things at some times, rather than being too safe. Do you think that's a good metaphor to have, or a motto or value to have, or do you think that's being overused or too not used enough?
I think this is super hard to make as a general statement. I guess if you run a nuclear plant, it's probably a bad idea.
Well said. Or a surgeon, for example. Yeah. Let's move fast and close that heart up and see what happens. No. Yeah. Well said.
I think this is a statement that comes from this industry, right? Where it doesn't matter. It's not a critical system for anybody, and nobody is threatened by.
But if I rephrase it, do you think tech companies, and not speaking nuclear plants or surgeons, but if we take recommender systems or whatnot, do you think in general that companies are moving too safe, so to speak, or being too careful in their planning rather than quickly trying something else?
No, I think they are maybe sometimes going too deep, too fast, rather than going too broad, too fast. So I've seen these cases where...
What do you mean too deep versus too broad?
Yeah, where you had you have hired a data science team to figure out super advanced use cases and do these research projects. But in the end, it turned out they didn't really have any impact on the business because nobody understood how to connect it back. Speaking recommender systems or search engines here as well, the algorithms that I've implemented in real life, they were not super advanced, and the problems that we fixed were super simple things that had a high impact. So there is kind of diminishing return of investment.
But couldn't you phrase that as moving, not moving fast, and rather moving slow, because you want to start with a really advanced solution rather than starting with a simple one, iterating, breaking, but then tweaking.
I think iterating and measuring your impact, that needs to be part of moving fast, right? If you just move fast and don't measure, that's probably
move fast down the black hole, the wrong hole, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But what you have, I like a word in here, impact. So moving fast with impact, or trying to make sure that whatever we do has impact. I think that is a key word here, that somehow we get lost in happy engineering, or I don't know what to call it, but
yeah, it's often the organization, right? So I think you asked for what are the components for successful or impactful AI, and I think it's 3 components. One is the technical part, that you need to have good engineers to build something good, but you also need the right method, like the right analytical method, or the knowledge of actually statistics. If you, for example, run an A/B test, it needs to have a solid statistical base. But the third one is then the decision making and processes after you create the insights. What do you do with it in the business? And all of these 3 need to play together.
But just to go back to what you said, because I think actually that's one of what I've seen most common mistakes that companies do, and that is to hire a data science team alone.
Yeah.
And they just say, okay, you data scientist, now try to figure this out. And they build a number of prototypes or do something, but they have no way to actually put that in production and to provide a value. And they get stuck in what Patrick Ekemo usually speaks about, the prototype graveyard.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Yeah. Because I think
completely.
And I think that's exactly what this moving fast and break things is really about. If you don't have the courage to actually put something in production, and not only have data scientists that may not, some they may do, but most, I would argue, data scientists don't know how to put things in production, so you can't break things, because they only build something that can't be broken even. So, but if you do move fast and quickly put it in production, you test it out, and it may break, but then you tweak it or throw it away. I think that's exactly what the move fast and break things are.
Okay, yeah, then I would probably subscribe to that. And the journey that I started describing earlier here, the maturity journey of a typical AI company, it starts with a technical platform, then doing these POCs to establish the value chain. And the third step is then the software, or the ML ops, essentially, right? So to streamline this, putting POCs into production at scale. How do you do that? That's another beast of a problem to solve. And there it's a lot of software development.
How big difference do you think it is to build a POC versus to do something in production?
It's a very different team that you need, a very different expertise you need.
And how should you do that? Should you have a data science at building a prototype and then handing it over to engineers that develop it? Or what's the right way to asking it? I'm trying to avoid asking 2 leading questions, but it's not easy.
It was a bit leading. I don't know. I think the current best practice seems to be an organizational model, which is a center of excellence, where you have a centralized team building a platform, like an ML platform, data platform, ML platform, that provides tooling to data scientists who are working very close to the business.
So should you start with that? I mean, in the first, imagine a company just saying, okay, we want to get started with data and AI. They may want to have a center of excellence, but it takes a long time to build that up, right? And then they have the choice. I have 5 people to hire to do something. What type of competences would you put in those 5 people?
But this is now I'm talking large organizations. You mentioned at scale earlier, right?
Yes.
So and you have 3 ways of working, 3 models here, organizational models. One is the centralized. Second is the embedded, and the third one is the hybrid, the hub and spoke, or center of excellence model, essentially.
Yes,
and then there's no right or wrong model. The question is only where in your life are you as a company?
And if you're completely new,
new, I would probably start with a centralized team.
Good.
Just because you have usually people who are new to the company is you want to develop the competence, the discipline, the function, right? So you need a tight communication there.
Only 5 data scientists at that time, or should it be also?
No, I mean,
I'm asking too many leading questions. I know. No, but I think it's really good learning, and you're saying, I think, what we mean, and reality, that is to also have a way to get started for companies, which is in the beginning, you need to start a centralized way. Otherwise, it will be, if it's a single person at different teams, they will never have the critical mass to do anything serious.
Yeah, but you also need to make sure that you are very close to the business. And usually how we do it is in sort of a war room. It sounds a bit negative, but a room or like a temporary team, which is cross-functional, which has like the data science people, but usually also the software developers who actually would put that product into the software, right? Or into the real, product of the company. And also the business stakeholder or whoever it is from the business who owns the use case or the business case. So bringing those people together in the same room for a few weeks to solve a specific problem, and then moving on, breaking down this team and form a new team for a new use case. This is kind of a model that works pretty well because you don't need to have a big reorg. You don't need to build borders or build walls in the company, but you still can put people together in a new way.
But I think one of the learnings, talking about this 2022, and then if we look back to the efforts when enterprises started to go into data science or whatever we want to call it, and I don't even need to go further down than 5 years. I mean, like the balancing of the team, like the whole idea of we need data scientists and now we will fix it. So we hire data scientists without the data engineers. And now in 2022, I would argue that we are hiring more data engineers and data scientists. And this is the right balance, by the way, even, because there's so much value and so much more work to be done. But this, I think, was completely lost in the whole hyped first
in the beginning.
It's interesting that many of my Netlight colleagues who work in ML, many of them say, "Yeah, I do ML engineering, but not really ML." But because most of the work is spent on actually engineering and mingling the data.
It's the plumbing.
Wrangling the data is called, like getting the technical, the plumbing, yeah.
And we should not use plumbing as something derogative.
No.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's the most important part of this whole thing.
But so many people don't understand that 95% of the work to actually get something that works and provides value is outside of the model.
Yes.
It's more than data. It's more about all the system around it, in the back end, in the front end, in the UX. And a lot of companies are not understanding this.
In 2016, 17, the conversation was truly naive here. Truly naive. We got these data scientists. How will they work? Where will you deploy the value? So, but I think I think most people, I'm not sure though, we who have worked in the consulting or we who have tried it, if I go to Scania or Vattenfall, but if you're a newbie, I'm not so sure everybody has understood the difference between data engineering, machine learning engineering, and advanced analytics. I don't think it's completely
or clear. AI and advanced analytics, which is two different things, I would argue as well.
Yes.
The time is flying away. We promised to get back to one topic, which was the tech giants, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Good one.
So before we bias you too much, do you have any thoughts about, without saying, what type of good or why they are good? Do you have, like, if we name, let's say, 5 tech giants, and you try to rank them in terms of goodness or evilness, or good, bad, and ugly?
But you need to allow him to understand what hat he has on, or in what light he is doing this argument.
Let's start it without giving too much color.
But is it about the product, or is it about...
Don't go there.
So the point is this. Okay, I frame it now. Okay, so from good to evil, that's all the frame you're going to get. And then, let's have 5 names.
Yeah.
Now you need to then build up your idea of what is good and what,
Okay.
we're not going to steer you, but from good to evil.
Okay. I think like spontaneously.
Okay, let's name 5.
Okay. So Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon.
Good. That's the one. Those are the ones.
And just, without thinking too much, what's the gut feeling? Which one is the...
And this is just for fun.
The goodest one, the most good company.
So actually, which one do you like? Is it good to evil, or is it what you like and dislike? Is it kind of different?
Yeah,
I think we said like and dislike.
Yeah.
Did we say good to evil? Really? I don't know.
Like and dislike them. Okay.
Probably, like and dislike is maybe easier than good to evil. Sounds so. I don't know.
Can you say the 5 again? I need to write them
Google,
down. Yeah.
Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. And not in any priority order, by the way.
Yeah, okay, but I need to prioritize.
You should find a priority.
From like to dislike. From like to dislike.
Google liked most.
Okay.
Followed by Apple and Microsoft. Facebook and then Amazon. I know you asked me why, right?
Exactly.
No,
yeah.
I must say first.
Yeah, we will all do it. We will all do it for fun.
Okay.
You were almost correct.
You were. Anders. I love it. We had this huge argument. Was it with Henry Landgren? Who did we have? This was so funny, and we got sort of.
I will say only one error there, but otherwise I agree.
No, I think it was with Henrik Landgren, and it was always provocative, and and everybody's trying to be. Anders is the best. He tries to come across as scientific and to be objective.
I also have built this reasoning in my head.
Obviously subjective, obviously very,
I have opinions.
Yeah, quite opinionated, subjective, but sells it like a scientist. And then Henrik Landgren just took the crap out of you. I loved it. It was funny. Anyway.
So what is the right order?
No. There's no okay. Now your order, not the right order, his order.
Yeah. So the only wrong you got was Apple. So I would put that. It's a bit hard. I feel ashamed about Facebook. I don't think there are. I mean, they received so much shit, and especially Mark Zuckerberg. But I would just move Apple down one step. So Google, Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, Amazon would be my list.
I think it's actually the correct order. Yeah, and I'll tell you why in a bit.
Okay. So I need to look at it again. Let's see. Okay. And I would put... I'm so colored now. I don't even have my own opinion.
You have the right answer.
Shit. You go on. I put the ball on the penalty kicks, and you could kick it. No, but just for fun, I would put Apple on top. Then I would put... Google, then I would put Microsoft, then I would put...
Yeah, Facebook and Amazon is hard.
Yeah, I would actually put Facebook and then Amazon.
Good. So the only company we're disagreeing about is Apple. Where should their location be? Otherwise, we have the same order, it seems.
Why I... my initial thought here was I would value or like more companies that are a platform rather than forcing people into a certain product, and also value open source more than closed gardens. Okay, so right? But then I dislike Facebook so much that I had to rank it down. Otherwise, Facebook would have been where you said it was. And Apple I put over Microsoft just because I like the products more.
Well,
when I work with it.
So you could say that's because you have bad taste. But sorry. No. Okay, so let me give a quick view of my thinking here. Apple, of course, makes awesome products. I think no one can dispute that. They are awesome to use and really high quality. And I think also a really big advantage with Apple is that they do care about user privacy to an extent that...
Yeah. True.
I think very few, if any, does in a higher extent. The problem with Apple, and I don't want to speak about the CEOs and everything, because I don't think that should be the reason. That could be a reason, but I'm not speaking about that. the main reason is that the contributions they make to open source and scientific community is horrible. And it's also that they have such a tendency to locking in people is, I think all of them are locking in people. So even though they are doing it to an extreme that perhaps very few others, by having special, adapters and whatnot that works with nothing else and hard to, convert. But so does Spotify and so does anyone else. So I think then the main reason I put Apple a bit lower is because of their lack of open sourcing and giving back to community, both open source and scientifically. And that, of course, is Google, Microsoft, Facebook doing much, much more. And especially Facebook, if we speak of the positive, we all know the negative sides of Facebook, but the positive sides is they have an awesome research division with Jan Lekunder, that they are doing so many things. They are publishing much more open source and with publications to a greater extent than Google in terms of how much they're open with. So if you look at translation models and whatnot, Google is not publishing the actual trained model. They're not publishing the code even sometimes. Sometimes they do. Facebook is doing that for basically any kind of research they're doing. They have the code, you have the data sets, you have the model, and the papers, of course. And they are much more open in that sense in giving back to the community when it comes to open source and science. Microsoft is actually improving a lot here as well, I would argue. Especially their scientific work is awesome, I must say. The product is not really keeping up with the scientific work, but it has, since Satya Nadella took over, they are going, they have been increasing in quality, I think, in extreme. And especially being back to open source, etc. Also outside of research, it's awesome. So they are really improving a lot. Yeah, I can speak more. Amazon, of course, the big thing with them is that they don't give back to open source. They even kill open source, I would argue, to a large extent, in taking open source product, doing awesome packaging, and then selling that to a very high price with a very good functionality, by the way. But they could, easily give back some of all the awesome work they're doing to open source, but they choose not to. And also research-wise, of course, they provide little, but not much.
So you're quite stringent in your analysis, and you're this is what I joked. You're coming in from a quite from your passion and research or open source, and you're afraid.
I think openness is
openness, yeah. And so basically, this becomes your compass. So this is your main compass when you are contrasting these 5 companies.
I mean, it's also product quality, etc., that I do bring in, I think.
So now it's my turn, right? Mm-hmm. I'm struggling because I have a couple of different tangents in my compass that competes. So my list is not coherent and logical fully. It's actually illogical to some degree.
So is mine, by the way.
Yeah. So I put Apple on top, and then so this now you will hear that I'm preaching for different things depending on who I put in what corner. So completely illogical. So Apple, I do value their understanding, and they value me, and they don't exploit me as much as I like me as the product, or my security and privacy is one thing. Yep. Coupled then with what I think it's for me as a user who are not an engineer, a user experience that tech software, what makes them locked down and integrated also makes for a good experience end to end. In my opinion, right? From my Apple TV and all that, and ultimately I'm an Apple user, right? So I'm not okay. So I'm now okay. If I hardcore, what do I prefer to use? What do I like to use? I like my Apple stuff. Period. Google, tricky here, because on the one hand side, I really dislike that I as my private data is I'm the product. So from this perspective, I should put them lower down on the list. But then I simply say, fuck it. I like YouTube. I think they're doing great stuff. I think Google search is an awesome contribution to mankind. And I'm not now talking open source and all that. No, I'm just talking what am I using on a daily basis, and what would really hurt me if I didn't have it. And I have now a car where I have Google Drive. Fucking awesome. and I can
Google Maps, right?
And Google Maps, I talk to my car. I try to talk to Siri in my car. Screw that. This I can talk to. Amazing stuff. Okay, this is why Google comes number 2 for me. So I'm like, wow. I'm the product. Fuck it. I don't care. It's too good. And then I get to number 3. What do I put on number 3? Microsoft is for me the halfway in the middle. I have a hard time placing them. I don't think they're evil. I don't know. They're somewhere in between. But I dislike then Facebook and Amazon more. So Microsoft for me is like, in the middle. Yeah, whilst I'm moving to negatives on Amazon and Facebook. And here, this is no logical because, Amazon has got, if you talk about AWS, great products and stuff like that. But, if I start Facebook here, for me, it's simply too much greed going on, too much funny stuff that's going on in a repetitive way. That's sort of where the filter bubble conversation, how much are we impacted by social networks and all that. That's I don't know if it's true, but I'm really concerned with it. And are they doing something that is worse than what Google is doing? I don't know. I really don't know. So this is very subjective. And then why Amazon comes at the bottom is that I think they are the ones that have shown most of all these companies, and maybe this is not fair, but my perception is that they have really shown a predatory behavior, both in terms of, if I look at how they compete, if I look at how they are sort of not taking care of, the minimum wage type situation that people are working on, I think it's predatory in some ways. They are exploiting their power in a way, that I think is the biggest. And this is completely subjective. And as you saw, my logic for why someone was on top and why someone was on the bottom was not a logical chain. But that was very subjective, my view.
Mm.
Fun discussion.
Fun discussion, isn't it?
We should need some more after work discussions on this. I think.
Someone will be really upset with us that we did. This was very politically incorrect.
Yes.
And for the listeners, this was fun. Yeah. This was used for fun.
Yeah, of course. So this is a very subjective topic, of
course. Yeah, I don't know. You should probably not have done this, but
of course you can voice opinions. I think that's interesting. As long as you're clear, that's an opinion.
This is a private opinion. Nothing else.
Anyway, I think we have to all agree that these 5 companies exert an enormous amount of power on our society today, and that's a bit scary potentially.
Yeah, but saying that, they're also giving us a lot of comfort and benefits in our normal daily lives.
I mean, otherwise we wouldn't use them.
Otherwise we wouldn't use them, right?
Yeah.
But your thoughts?
I'm an optimist, but I agree that it's problematic. And this, we talked about it earlier, the divide between like the corporate world and the academia or the public sector is real, and it's kind of getting really
that's
intense.
a good closing topic, I think, potentially. What do you think in 5-10 years will happen? Do you think that, for one, data and AI will be more immersive, or it will be used by everyone, and that will that way lower or increase the lower bar, so to speak, to which companies that can be more of a tech company, so to speak? Or do you think that they will increase even more in speed, the big tech giants, so the gap will increase even more? Or but that could be still good potentially if they do it in the right way. It's just that as long as most of them are moving in the right direction, then it could be good for society as a whole still, right? Or what's your thinking?
Yeah, I'm an optimist, right? And I believe, like, if you talk about innovation, I think it's not an option to not innovate. So we can't stop it, right? Yeah. It cannot be stopped. It has to go out there. Yeah. And I think the question is only, what kind of policy framework do we build around innovation in order to make it good for society? And I think there, looking at Europe now, because I don't know as much about the US or like Asia, China. In Europe, I think we are aware that we need policies and we need to increase the speed of political decisions to catch up, and we have taken the first steps. And I believe that if we go down that road and create good policies, we can actually help smaller companies enter the market, and we can steer what we do with AI and what we don't do with AI. I think Europe can be, a role model area in the world for doing that. Yeah.
Do you have any idea?
We have done it for. I think we have done it for green, like sustainable technologies already.
And
right?
Netlight is a very good example of efforts to stimulate the Germany did Energiewende.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a fantastic example.
The carbon taxation we have, I think that's a policy that really works, and we have shown that it can work and it can really impact a big industry. And I think the same can happen for AI.
But what should we do more of? What are you sort of missing, or what do you think we need to focus on in this, in our policy making or in our investments, or how do you see it? What should we focus and do more of?
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, in terms of what should we, in terms of use cases for AI.
No, I was more thinking about this as, okay, if EU in some ways wants to stay on the right side or of the AI divide, or sort of be a role model, like a relevant role model, so to speak. Where do we need to invest, or where should we put our emphasis or efforts? Like we're working on the policy making, and we are trying to be a role model in the most regulated. That, someone can argue that slows us down. Maybe that's great. I don't, AI for good kind of thing. Then we have the investments. Do we have the VC? Why don't we have any hyperscalers? There's no hyperscalers in Europe.
AI is like a general purpose technology, right? And probably we are a bit late if we want to become the area in the world to make the groundbreaking groundwork, so to speak, because that kind of is already happening somewhere else in a very fast way.
Do it in small areas.
Exactly. And I think we can actually carve out what are the strategic use cases that are important for society, or like decarbonization, or like the electrical, like the sustainable electricity, sustainable energy. These kind of topics could be a good use case to drill down. What
do you think about some people say that Europe may not be leading the latest, research in AI, but they could be the best in applying it. They could be the best in actually putting AI into societal good.
Yeah, in certain areas, certainly. Yeah.
Why not in broad areas?
No, but
probably also. But at some point you need to decide. You cannot apply to everything. No. You have to see what makes sense for society.
But compared to US and China, potentially.
I guess China is doing it quite well as well, right? So they have a quite focused and
very well planned.
Strategy.
What we are seeing now correlates quite a bit to Christian Gutmann, and we have talked about this before. That maybe if you look carefully, I think Germany is a very good example here. If you look at Europe and what are the profile of our business in Europe. So we have an industry construct, or we have industry clusters where we are very, very strong in engineering or manufacturing. And there is now a case, okay, someone tried to build a platform, horizontally. Maybe we should do the kick-ass platform for a vertical. So we have all this about edge intelligence, manufacturing, something that makes sense in our industrial clusters. As an example, right? If you need to be world-class and you want to support Stuttgart sort of thing, what would that vertical, what would that be? You don't need to do everything. There's some fundamental types of use cases or type of techniques that you need to be really, really good at. Like Christian was something onto that as well. And I think that's what you kind of alluded to also, if I'm
I think that's what I mean. Like you like if we believe as Europe that we need to face certain challenges like transforming the energy production to renewables.
Yeah, that's one word.
We also know that AI can play a central role in that. Then we can invest in that specifically, and that can then become the export. So stuff that we export to other regions.
Yeah, I think we could continue for a much longer time as well, and we probably will, at least some time more. But I think we need to find a close here as well. And for next, can perhaps you can speak about, what's next in your life? What's happening in coming months for you, privately, professionally? Something special going on?
Yeah, special for me right now is to meet people in real life. Like being here is just so fantastic. It feels like I have this whole list of people that I haven't met now for 2 years during COVID and want to meet again. So I will have a lot of lunches booked with people that I haven't met. Also traveling to our other offices quite a bit nowadays. Yeah. There's actually interesting counterintuitive fact that I thought that after COVID, we would travel less, but actually I've now started so many collaborations with my colleagues in Germany, other countries, and now I want to see them and meet all those people. So I will actually travel a bit more nowadays.
That's why we have the longest waiting time for getting passports, I think, in Sweden ever.
Have you heard that?
Half a year or something to just get the passport updated.
Yeah. So that's happening for me. Yeah,
interesting. That sounds great. Anyone that you would recommend to come on this podcast? Someone that you like to us having interrogated, or you listening to that? You personally would
interrogate.
Yeah,
no,
definitely
conversation.
Anyone that you are interested in hearing more about?
I have a fantastic colleague, industry colleague, Christer Jakobsson. He's fantastic. Christer Jakobsson.
Christer Jakobsson.
He has been working in the data science area for a long time. A very great mix of academia and industry.
Nice.
Has worked at Tobii, worked with eye tracking or computer vision there, research labs, but also in more academia in RISE, the Research Institute of Sweden. Nice. So he has great stories to tell. You should meet him.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then we talked a bit about ML ops, or how do we scale deploying those proof of concepts we built into actual systems. And I have two fantastic colleagues from Netlight in Germany who have worked with these big German clients and have seen these large scale systems and come more from the engineering perspective, like ML engineering, data engineering. Michael Ludwig and Mirko Gontek. So when they're here in Stockholm, you should get them here.
Michael Ludwig and who? What is that?
Mirko Gontek.
You have to spell it for me later.
I can,
And great. That's awesome. Great ideas. We should certainly try to bring them on. Mirko, it's been a true pleasure to have you here. And now we have some time to continue with the after work. But thank you very much for coming. It's been a true pleasure.
It was super fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mirko.
Thank you.